Today we will take up chapter 8, Sankhya and Yoga. Well, as I told you earlier, Sankhya and Yoga are the classical systems of Indian philosophy, and this chapter is based more or less on these schools of thought. But the important thing is that how does Gita take these schools of thought? Does it take them in their entirety, or does it take a few things and reject a few things of these philosophies? Because at the time that the Gita had come about, we had already these schools of thought in India. Like we have the Mimamsaka, we have the Vishishtadvaita, we had this Sankhya and Yoga. So the Gita is in a way quite an essence of this Indian systems of thought. Of course, including thought from the Vedas and the Upanishads that existed before the Gita. So we have a very fine philosophical synthesis in the Gita. That means on the metaphysical level, the Gita takes the Upanishadic basics. That means the question of the Supreme, the Brahman, the Atman. And on the philosophic side, we have the Sankhya thought. And on the practical level, we have the yoga system, not yoga as such, but yoga system. So it's a fine combination of the Upanishads, the Sankhya and the yoga. In fact, I'm already telling you what we will have in the next chapter, Sankhya, Yoga and Vedanta. In fact, Gita is a kind of synthesis of these three. But the important thing is that it really brings in sufficient changes in this thought of Sankhya and Yoga, whereby the Gita can claim its own new philosophy, and we cannot say Gita is Sankhya plus Yoga. It metamorphosizes everything in the Sankhya and Yoga and seeks only and keeps only some of the principal elements. And of course, Sri Aurobindo is going to bring out all that similarities and differences in this chapter. And tomorrow, perhaps, after giving you an introduction today, I'll give you a full length clarification or talk on the Sankhya and Yoga systems as they are. Because as I plan my lesson, tomorrow's lesson would require a kind of a detailed analysis of what Sankhya is, because Sri Aurobindo himself is going to give you a detailed analysis of Sankhya and Yoga. So I'll give you both the classical system as well as what Sri Aurobindo has given here, so that you understand the difference. So having said that, of course the word Sankhya comes from the word Sankhya. It's not the Dirgha, otherwise we call it Sankhya with a elongated. So that is derived from the word Sankhya, which means right knowledge or number. So Gita takes it as the right knowledge জল খাবে? So Gita takes it as the right knowledge. And then it avoids the Sankhya, the number. The number is actually referring to the number of evolutes, the 24 number of evolutes. That means Sankhya is a philosophy which gives you the process of creation itself. And it gives you quite systematically how creation took place, step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. So there are 24 steps, not 24 steps, 24 results or products or evolutes. So that's why we call it the number. So number refers to the number of evolutes. So that is the basics. And as we go along, I'll give you greater details, and most probably tomorrow would be the day when I'll give you the classical Sankhya and Yoga systems. In the moment of his turning from this first and summary answer to Arjuna's difficulties, and in the very first words which strike the keynote of a spiritual solution, the teacher makes at once a distinction which is of the utmost importance for the understanding of the Gita, the distinction of Sankhya and Yoga. Such is the intelligence, the intelligent knowledge of things and will, declared to thee in the Sankhya. Hear now this in the Yoga, for if thou art in Yoga by this intelligence, O son of Pritha, thou shalt cast away the bondage of works. That is the literal translation of the words in which the Gita announces the distinction it intends to make. Well, that is just the first verse, that is chapter 2, verse number 39, is what we get here. Now begins the description. The Gita is in its foundation a Vedantic work. It is one of the 3 recognized authorities for the Vedantic teaching. And although not described as a revealed scripture, although that is to say it is largely intellectual, ratiocinative, philosophical in its method, founded indeed on the truth, but not the directly inspired word which is the revelation of the truth through the higher faculties of the seer. It is yet so highly esteemed as to be ranked almost as a 13th Upanishad. Well, here I think you understand the levels of the different scriptures that we have. The basic one is the Vedantic one, the Vedantic teaching, which is actually revealed as a scripture. Not only as revealed as a scripture, and although not described as a revealed scripture, you see, in our Indian philosophy, only the Vedas are supposed to be the Shruti. Shruti, that means that which is revealed and heard. So that's where they are given the highest place in our Indian scriptures. It is not mind-born. It is the mantras that are purely heard by the rishis. Heard means revealed by the divine, and the rishis have only to hear and also see the truth. So that is a level of consciousness which is pure intuition. Here, we have the Vedas, and this is a revelation, and the level of consciousness is that of intuition. So as we know, intuition has nothing to do with reason. And they have been heard. So this revealed or Shruti or heard. That means heard scriptures. And these heard scriptures, now who can hear such things? Can you and me directly hear the Vedas? It's not possible. Because you have to have your consciousness established on the intuitive level. And you know very well the level of intuition in Aurobindo's own system of the planes of consciousness. We have here overmind, then we have the supermind, then the third level is intuition. Then the lowest one here we have the higher mind, we have the illumined mind, and then we have intuition here. So our mind is this at this level, the lowest level. Then we have stage 1 higher mind, illumined mind, and intuitive mind is the third level. And then fourth we have overmind, and here we have the supermind. There could be other sub-levels here which we don't enter into in detail. So you see, unless and until we are at this level, we can't receive. Once in a while we do receive an intuition. Just a streak of intuition comes in, just once in a while. But if you have to receive the Vedas and pure revelation, you have got to live in this intuitive consciousness. And that is what the Vedic rishis did. Their consciousness was constantly on this level. Because after that, we have the Upanishad. These are inspirations. A level of inspiration below the intuition. And then we have the Gita, which actually comes to the level of the illumined mind. Then we have the schools of thought, Shaddarshana we call them, or 6 thoughts of philosophy, 6 schools of philosophy, which comes to the level of the higher mind. Of course, they range between higher mind and mind, highly philosophic, but they go between the two. And then we have the, on the levels of philosophy, yeah, that's it. So this level of consciousness tells you now where the Gita stands. That is why Aurobindo is telling us here that the Gita is not conceived as a revealed scripture. It is highly philosophical. So it is in the illumined mind which draws its inspirations from the Vedas and also from the higher mind, that is of the schools of thought of Sankhya and Yoga. So Gita is kind of midway. It is neither pure revelation nor pure philosophy. It is midway. And being midway, it takes recourse to the Upanishads, Vedanta, as well as to the schools of thought. So therefore we have a great advantage that is not highly symbolic like the Vedas and the Upanishad, and also it is not pure philosophy like we have the schools of Vedanta, Vishishtadvaita, which are purely mental, and of course not mental in the lower level but in the higher level of the higher mind. So here, there's one more thing I should add here. How is it that right in the beginning of human evolution that we have such a high scripture? or such high rishis of such high consciousness. You see, normally we say that as per the theory of evolution, we have, right from the vital, the mental, and then it proceeds this way, and then we reach the intuition level. You see, today the human beings are at the level of the mind. Evolution has come from the vital, below that was the mental. We have come here. And only some people range in the higher mind. Very few. We, some of us, the poets, the scientists, the philosophers, catch glimpses of the intuition. But here we see a continuous wave of intuition through all the Vedas. That is a big question. Then who are these rishis? If we follow the evolutionary process, they are way away. So there could be two possibilities. One, that they are the, if I can use the word, remnants of a previous civilization which had already reached levels far beyond the Vedas. Because in the Vedas we have distinctly the term Pitrus. Pitrus means forefathers. So the Vedas, Vedic rishis speak of knowledge that they have got from their forefathers. So that means, who are their forefathers? Not the literal forefathers. Forefathers of knowledge itself. Those who exceeded them. So it could be possible that they are the end generation of rishis, and prior to them there was already a greater knowledge that was in a greater civilization. But then the mother gives us a wonderful clue to that. She says, actually Vedic rishis are not evolutionary beings. They are involutionary beings. And until I read that, the question of the Vedic rishis and their consciousness remained a mystery and a dilemma. But in one of her conversations, she says, they are actually involutionary beings. That settles the question so clearly. That means they do not belong to this humanity going from mind to higher mind to illumined mind to intuitive mind to overmind. No. They have sort of descended from the higher levels of consciousness for the purpose. So they are not evolutionary. We are the evolutionary beings. After taking thousands and millions of births, we will go slowly towards the higher consciousness. But they are descendants of a higher consciousness in the process of involution. So they are, what we say, they have taken a kind of an avataric manifestation. So they have come, and you can see they have come in numbers, not one, not two, quite in numbers. So it was a period when these beings of the higher level of consciousness, they descended in India, and because they descended, they had this high level of intuitive consciousness, and because of that, they could hear the Vedas revealed to them, and those they have passed them on to India. Not only India, I would say to the whole world. Because you read Aurobindo and you would understand the effect that the Upanishads have had on the entire Western civilization. So we think that West has come out with great Socrates and Plato and Parmenides and whatever. But you will see at the base of all these people, there is already the Upanishads. In fact, there's a beautiful line, I forget, I'll see if I remember that. So what Sri Aurobindo wants to tell is the Upanishads have spread all over the world and have given it the basic spiritual civilization. Of course, that the Western people have interpreted them rationally on the mental level and brought it down to the level of philosophy, whereas we have kept them in the purity of a spiritual vision. However, this is something that we should understand, otherwise we may misunderstand what Sri Aurobindo is writing here, or not only Sri Aurobindo is writing, why in Indian philosophy itself we have given the Bhagavad Gita a kind of a third place. So imagine we say on one side Lord Krishna, the avatar himself, has revealed the Bhagavad Gita, and yet in our Indian system of philosophy and thought, the Gita is not revered as much as the Vedas and the Upanishads. So now we understand the difference. And because of this intellectual rendering, that is on the illumined mind, the level of the consciousness is different. It does not mean that Sri Krishna himself did not have this overmind, as all of us know through Sri Aurobindo that he represented the overmind. But the truth that he has given to mankind, he came down because it had to be available. Otherwise, if he also from the overmental level repeated the Vedas, it wouldn't have been purposeful. And also you must understand, as the age proceeds, the truth also takes a different form. Here it was the age of what we say Mahakali. The age of Maheshwari was gone. The age of Maheshwari was the age of knowledge and wisdom. That was the age of the Vedas and the Upanishads. But then comes the Kali, the power, the energy, the force, which got translated in history as wars, as kingdoms, as the power of the emperors. And you see the whole of mankind during that period goes through lots of wars, lots of battles, because that is the age of the settlement on the physical level of the boundaries of nationalities, of kingdoms, of names, of emperors. So in that time, what do? We don't utter the Vedas and keep chanting the mantras and be in meditation. You have got to have an active philosophy of action and life. So Sri Krishna brings the whole Vedas onto the level of action. Whereas on the level of the Vedas, we have only ceremonies, we have pujas, we have great meditations. But here he says, no, this is a period of action. So, the Veda, the Gita here, as Sri Aurobindo writes, is largely intellectual, ratiocinative, philosophical in its method, founded indeed on the truth, but not the directly inspired word. You see, W capital. The directly inspired word is that of the Vedas and the Upanishads. So it is so highly esteemed as to be ranked almost as the 13th Upanishad. You see, it's not ranked as the fifth Veda. It's part of the Upanishads. But still, its Vedantic ideas are throughout and thoroughly colored by the ideas of the Sankhya and the Yoga way of thinking, and it derives from this coloring the peculiar synthetic character of its philosophy. It is in fact primarily a practical system of yoga that it teaches and it brings in metaphysical ideas only as explanatory of its practical system. Well, basically, as we have just now discussed, Gita is basically a practical system of yoga. So the whole basis of the Gita is the right law of action. But every action needs to be supported by a philosophy. And we have seen this in our philosophers' life divine classes. That we all, whatever actions we do, we have a philosophy to support us. If you say, hey, why are you doing like that? You say, because I believe this is the aim of life. I believe that this is what should be our attitude to work, etc. There's a question of belief. There's a philosophy. So Gita wants to give you an action, theory of action, but then it takes support of the thought structure given by the Sankhya and the Vedanta. That means the Upanishads. So basically, let's not think of the Gita as a book of philosophy, but as a book that gives you a higher law of action. But please do not again jump to conclusion that it is a book of Karma Yoga. Because the moment we mention the word action, you may think, oh, that means it's a book of Karma Yoga. No. Let's be very clear on that. It is not a book of Karma Yoga. And I still insist that it's a book of action which takes support of thought from other philosophies and other ways. So here we see, it is in fact primarily a practical system of yoga that it teaches and it brings in metaphysical ideas only as explanatory of its practical system. Nor does it merely declare Vedantic knowledge, but it founds knowledge and devotion upon works. Even as it uplifts works to knowledge, their culmination, and informs them with devotion as their very heart and kernel of their spirit. So here, although we said it is a book of action, what's happening is that action itself cannot survive. As we said, it needs the support of knowledge and it requires the fueling of devotion. So proper action must have the fuel, the energy of devotion, without which action cannot last. It will become dry and it will fade off. But the constant energy source for the action comes from devotion, bhakti. And that's what we see in integral yoga too, when Aurobindo tells us that when you act for the mother, you must have devotion for the mother. You cannot not have devotion for the mother and then say, no, I'm acting for the mother. So that's why I feel, in this philosophy, when we say the word, we are working for the mother, it is a wonderful synthesis in itself. Because you cannot work for the mother if you don't have devotion. Devotion is that fuel. You see what all we do in the ashram and the devotees, that constantly we are working for the mother. What is the source of this energy, this passion? It's love for the mother. So you see, it is all interlinked. The more you work, the more your devotion increases. The more your devotion increases, the more you work. They are interconnected. You cannot say, no, I love the mother very much, but I like to sit at home, read books and watch TV and enjoy myself. Sorry. You are under an illusion. So the devotion has to get translated into action. Now both of them will culminate in knowledge. That's what the Gita is telling here. That knowledge, jnana marga as you say, comes as a culmination, because you see, you are constantly working for the mother, you are having devotion for the mother, then you start getting questions. I am working, but what do I do with this work? Is it just the question of building a building, second building, third building, building a garden? But is there no end to this? And what is the end of all this? then questions start coming in your mind. Why am I working? Okay, I love the mother. But is that sufficient? Then how do I work? With what attitude do I work? Then comes the mantra, aspiration, surrender, rejection, etc. So already knowledge has come in. And then as you put this knowledge into practice, then you see your devotion increases. So it is a wonderful system, and the whole thing we have put it into one single phrase, work for the mother. So we don't mean physically go and work in the garden or digging up the pits. Any kind of work. But this is a single mantra that I want to work for the mother. How, in what manner, which way, all that is details. So that's what Lord Krishna is explaining here. That it founds knowledge and devotion upon works, even as it uplifts works to knowledge, their culmination. Again, its yoga is founded upon the analytical philosophy of the Sankhyas. Takes that as a starting point and always keeps it as a large element of its method and doctrine. But still, it proceeds far beyond it. Negatives even some of its characteristic tendencies and finds a means of reconciling the lower analytical knowledge of Sankhya with the higher synthetic and Vedantic truth. So he gives us the first hint here, that the Gita goes beyond the Sankhya system and negatives even some of its characteristic tendencies. It rejects some of the principal things of Sankhya. I mean, I will not foretell all these things because Sri Aurobindo himself is going to explain. But just to make it clear at this stage, for example, the concept of Purusha in the Sankhya, Gita rejects it. It doesn't believe in the one Purusha and one Prakriti and this duality. And instead of that, the Gita brings about its own concept of Purusha, calling it Purushottama. And then it would say, there is one Purushottama, then there are two Purushas. You see, there is, again we will see Kshara Purusha and Akshara Purusha. So it has almost got, instead of one Purusha of Sankhya, it has got two Purushas and then a Purushottama. So you see, these are not there in the Sankhya. So these are what we say the Vedantic. You see how Sri Krishna takes from everywhere. It's a beautiful synthesis of Vedanta because of the Purushottama and the two Purushas. And then it takes the nature, Prakriti of the Sankhya. And then it takes the yoga, the system, the practical system of, of practicing Sankhya, yoga system. So that is, I'm just giving you a passing reference so that you understand the thought here itself. But we'll get the details in the next couple of paras. What then are the Sankhya and yoga of which the Gita speaks? They are certainly not the systems which have come down to us under these names as enunciated respectively in the Sankhya Karika of Ishwar Krishna and the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali. So you can see the founders of Sankhya, the founder is Ishwara Krishna in his great treatise called the Sankhya Karika, and the yoga system has been propounded by the famous Patanjali. But it says Gita does not take these systems of thought as they are. This Sankhya is not a system of Karikas, at least as that is generally understood. For the Gita nowhere for a moment admits the multiplicity of Purushas as a primal truth of being, and it affirms emphatically what the traditional Sankhya strenuously denies, the one as self and Purusha, that one again as the Lord, Ishvara or Purushottama, and Ishvara as the cause of the universe. Well, I just mentioned, I did not know it was coming right in the next paragraph, that the Gita rejects the multiplicity of the Purushas. Please remember this idea, because tomorrow I'll take up this question of the multiplicity of the Purushas. You see, Sankhya propound that there are many Purushas and one Prakriti. Vedanta propound that there is one Purusha and many Prakritis. It is just the opposite. Many Prakritis also in a specific meaning, but this multiple Purushas is something that the Gita cannot accept. There is only one Purushottama. So you see, Sankhya therefore becomes a dualistic philosophy. I mean, nowhere in Indian philosophy we had this kind of a dualism where there are two realities. Every time we say there is only one reality, that is the Brahman. And then we have multiple tiers below, levels of consciousness. But here they start with two. So Sri Krishna is saying that he will not accept the multiple Purushas. For him, there is only one as self and Purusha, that one again as the Lord, Ishvara or Purushottama, and Ishvara is the cause of the universe. So Purushottama is the highest and Ishvara is the Lord of the universe. The traditional Sankhya is, to use our modern distinctions, atheistic. The Sankhya of the Gita admits and subtly reconciles the theistic, pantheistic and monistic views of the universe. So I think students who are really would like to go a little deeper into Sankhya and Gita should note the first difference, that the Purushas are only one in the Gita and in Sankhya it is multiple. Second distinction, the Gita is theistic, Sankhya is atheistic. And this is a major problem, because of which yoga, Patanjali's yoga, brought in the concept of God. Because those who follow only the Sankhya system, they are atheistic. So if you want to follow Sankhya, then the yoga said it cannot be followed. So they bring in the concept of God as well as Gita. Because if Gita does not bring in the concept of God, then Gita would not be Gita itself, because it is the Lord himself, the avatar himself, speaking about it, so he cannot deny his own status. That is the major difference, that one is theistic, the other is atheistic. Nor is this yoga the yoga system of Patanjali. So first one we had the difference between Gita and Sankhya. The second one is Gita and yoga. For that is a purely subjective method of Raja Yoga, an internal discipline, limited, rigidly cut out, severely and scientifically graded, by which the mind is progressively stilled and taken up into samadhi, so that we may gain the temporal and eternal results of this self-exceeding. The temporal in a great expansion of the soul's knowledge and powers, the eternal in the divine union. But the yoga of the Gita is a large, flexible and many-sided system with various elements, which are all successfully harmonized by a sort of natural and living assimilation. And of these elements, Raja Yoga is only one and not the most important and vital. This is the major difference again between yoga system and the Gita. Because in the yoga system there is only the question of the quietening of the mind. They emphasize on the Raja Yoga. That means through the process of meditation. Well, we have what we call the Ashtanga Yoga is there, the 8 levels of yoga in the Patanjali. I'll take it up tomorrow. There are different levels, they say Yama and Niyama, Dharana and all that, and ultimately leading you to Samadhi. So the whole idea of yoga is to lead you to a samadhi wherein you are completely absorbed in such a consciousness that you do not know the difference between the subject and the object. It means that you are not even aware of this world. So you are completely cut off from the world. So how can the Gita accept this? As we said, Gita wants you to work and act in the world and not get away from the world. So obviously this kind of an aim of the Gita, of the yoga system, to be lost in samadhi, Sri Krishna cannot accept. So he says, that's not something that's suitable. But where is it? What is it that Sri Krishna takes of the Gita, of the yoga? We will see that. This yoga does not adopt any strict and scientific gradation, but it's a process of natural soul development. It seeks by the adoption of a few principles of subjective poise and action to bring about a renovation of the soul and a sort of change, ascension or new birth out of the lower nature into the divine. So one, in Raja Yoga, it is the question of the development of the samadhi state. That means your mind alone is attacked. In the sense you silence the mind, take it to some other level. But what happens to your inner realization? Atman, your devotion, all these things do not come into picture. Whereas the Gita is basically a system which promotes natural soul development. When we say the word soul development, the three factors come in: knowledge, bhakti and karma. It's through this process that it takes up a soul development, and it adopts a few principles of subjective poise and action to bring about a renovation of the soul and a sort of change. He uses a beautiful phrase called the renovation of the soul. That means there is a kind of a change, a kind of a shifting in the soul's level. The soul, by dedicating itself to the divine, by dedicating itself for the loka sangraha, for the welfare of humanity, and by becoming this kind of a attitude of equanimity, of samatha, of detachment, of desirelessness. By all this you can imagine what a tremendous, magnificent change comes in the entire being of the human instrument. Whereas Raja Yoga is exclusively one path of the mind. So it is rejected. Accordingly, its idea of samadhi is quite different from the ordinary notion of the yogic trance. And while Patanjali gives to works only an initial importance for moral purification and religious concentration, the Gita goes so far as to make works the distinctive characteristic of yoga. The second point here. First one was the mind development versus the soul development. First difference. And the second difference, we are getting the question of the works. Gita is fully based on works. In fact, work is the nodus around which there is knowledge and devotion. But whereas in the yoga system, work is only a kind of an excuse, a kind of what we say, the maintenance for sustenance. You do the minimum work, like your body, you eat and sleep and all that. But don't involve yourself in the work, because you involve yourself more in the meditation. Every hour that you get, you start meditating, concentrating within yourself so that you can get into a trance. So the second difference is works. Unimportance of works in the yoga and the full importance of works in the Gita. Next we see, action to Patanjali is only preliminary. In the Gita it is a permanent foundation. In the Raja Yoga, it has practically to be put aside when its result has been attained, or at any rate ceases very soon to be a means for the yoga. For the Gita, it is a means of the highest ascent and continues even after the complete liberation of the soul. This is the third one. That is, in Raja Yoga, the moment you come to the level of the samadhi, you minimum maintenance of the physical. And even it is said that when you live for certain days lost in the samadhi, they call it 15 days or 17 or 19, I don't know the exact number, that the body automatically falls off. That the body cannot sustain itself when your consciousness is lost in the samadhi for more than 15 days. Then it dies. So therefore it is, as he says, it is preliminary. The action in yoga, Patanjali, is preliminary and it may fall off. But in the Gita, even after achieving not samadhi, because that is not the ideal of the Gita, but a unification with your inner being, you continue to work for the world. That is where Sri Krishna brings in the question of Loka Sangraha. Then he tells Arjuna, after attaining the inner being, the inner psychic, no, he doesn't use the word psychic, the Atman, he says, then you work for the welfare of humanity. I mean, it is a little close to Sri Aurobindo at this point. Sri Aurobindo also mentions the ascent or the realization of your inner being as the first part of yoga. Then he would say you embrace the humanity. But in the process of embracing humanity, you are also descent of consciousness is there, which transforms your external being. The third step is absent in the Gita. So Gita and Sri Aurobindo, they agree in the first two steps. But Sri Aurobindo goes beyond by the third step where he says, transformation is a must of your outer being. Whereas in the Gita he says, Arjuna, he says, establish yourself within and then act. That means you realize your inner psychic being and then act not only for yourself, for the world. So it is said here, the Gita, it is a means of highest ascent and continues even after the complete liberation of the soul. So we see the three differences, yoga, Gita and Sri Aurobindo. I mean, you should be able to analyze now very clearly if I bring in Sri Aurobindo. Now this much has to be said in order to avoid any confusion of thought that might be created by the use of familiar words in a connotation wider than the technical sense now familiar to us. Still, all that is essential in the Sankhya and Yoga systems, all in them that is large, Catholic and universally true, is admitted by the Gita, even though it does not limit itself by them like the opposing schools. Well, so, in fact, we have got, in gist, the essential difference between Gita, Yoga, Gita and Sankhya. But later on we will see how Gita replaces what it rejects. In these two paragraphs we have seen only what the Gita has rejected from Sankhya and Yoga. But then it's only in the next para or the fourth one, he will tell us how Gita fulfills the picture or fills up the picture. So he says now in this para that it rejects all that is there, that it does not agree, but all that is, universal, all that is Catholic, he says Gita accepts all that. Even that does not limit itself by them like the opposite schools. If Sankhya is the Catholic and Vedantic Sankhya, such as we find it in its first principles and elements in the great Vedantic synthesis of the Upanishads and in the later developments of the Puranas. Now he calls it, you see the word, it's Sankhya, not the Sankhya itself. That means the Sankhya which it has adopted is the Catholic and Vedantic Sankhya. Now we have a new term called the Vedantic Sankhya, because now, this is so almost we see among the two principles of Purusha and Prakriti in Sankhya, half of it is eliminated. There is a Purusha aspect completely. So what Gita takes up is only the Prakriti aspect and replaces the Purusha by the Vedanta. So now the new term that we get is Vedantic Sankhya, such as we find it in the first principles and elements in the great Vedantic synthesis of the Upanishads and in the later developments of the Puranas. Its idea of yoga is that large idea of a principally subjective practice and inner change. So the first one we have seen, Sankhya, now yoga, necessary for the finding of the self or the union with God, of which the Raja Yoga is only one special application. So very clear. So it takes up the yoga, the Ashtanga Yoga, the practical side, and says those who want to follow Raja Yoga is okay. But that is not the exclusive path. You can reach a higher level of consciousness, a level of trance, but that is not the only way, because to that Raja Yoga you have to add the devotion, you have to add the karma. But I think by the time you add devotion and karma, your aim of reaching trance or samadhi changes itself. Because you imagine if you are really working for the mother and you are deeply involved in her work, who would think of samadhi? At least I wouldn't ever believe or think of losing myself in samadhi and not working on the physical level. Because if I lose myself in the samadhi, I disconnect myself with the world, which means I do not work anymore for the mother, which means my devotion is again getting, if not withered away, but at least, it starts diminishing. Because action and devotion are, the two wheels of this yoga. They go hand in hand. So if I neither act nor have devotion, then I said, what is the fun of this integral yoga? So the more you work in this integral yoga, or according to Gita, the same way, if you bring in bhakti yoga and karma yoga, who would want trance? So automatically the trance is eliminated. So he says, its idea of yoga is that large idea of a principally subjective practice and inner change necessary for the finding of the self. That means, where the yoga tells you about the dharana and yoga and niyama and yamas, these are some of the self-controls. So Gita says it's good. You have self-controls. You have this kind of a withdrawal. It's necessary. Because if you jump all the time into the world full of desires, full of attachments and all that, you may reach nowhere. So it takes, maybe out of the first 8 steps which you will see subsequently, out of the Ashtanga Yoga, I may say, if samadhi is taken away, dhyana also it can take. Almost 7 of the steps of yoga, it will accept. The 8th and the last step of samadhi, it will reject. Not only will it reject, but the sadhaka of the Gita himself rejects it. Because he finds so much of joy and bliss in working for Lord Krishna, for the mother, for the divine, that he will refuse to be disconnected with this world. So the number 8 step automatically gets disconnected. So whereas the other subjective practices are good, important for the union with God, of which the Raja Yoga is only one special application. The Gita insists that Sankhya and Yoga are not two different, incompatible, discordant systems, but one in their principle and aim. They differ only in their method and starting point. Well, here we see a little different point now coming in, that the Gita accepting them as more or less one system, that's Sankhya and Yoga. Even classically we always say Sankhya Yoga. I mean, in our philosophy always we say Sankhya Yoga. We never say Sankhya, Vedanta, Mimamsa, Yoga. We never say that. In every book of philosophy you will see the moment you have Sankhya, next chapter is Yoga. Always. The sequence is always maintained. Because Sankhya, even in the old theories, old philosophy, is a theory, and Yoga is the practice. So they always go together. So we have almost a hyphenated word, Sankhya-Yoga. It is one philosophy. So that's what Aurobindo is telling us here. They are not incompatible, discordant systems, but one in their principle and aim. They differ only in their method and starting point. Now, what is this method? You see, Sankhya also says by meditation you differentiate your witness, Purusha and Prakriti. But Sankhya more or less gives you the theory. How do you differentiate your Prakriti and Purusha? Sankhya doesn't give. It is Yoga system which says how to go about in meditation. For example, when it says do this meditation of dhyana, it gives the full details. That how you take up a candle, burn the candle and start looking at it, staring at it, and then you say this complete focusing of our, not only of our vision, but our concentration comes on this candle. So that's how they train you to concentrate first. Then it comes to meditation. So these are the practical lessons which Yoga gives, whereas the Sankhya says, you should detach yourself from Prakriti and Purusha. Fine. But how? The how is given by Yoga. It's exactly a similar thing like the life divine and the synthesis of Yoga. In the life divine, we have the Sankhya type of the knowledge, and how to go about it, we have the synthesis of Yoga. So we have a very beautiful parallel in Aurobindo to what we see in the classical system of Sankhya and Yoga. Well, I'll stop at that. We'll take a short break and we'll come back another 10, 20 or so, 20 minutes.